Picture this. You scrape together your life savings to buy a patch of desert that everyone in town jokes is so worthless, it wouldn't be worth the paper the deed is printed on. But as the sun sets on your first day as a landowner, a strange glimmer in the rocky soil catches your eye. Something that transforms this laughingstock purchase into ground zero for a discovery that will shake an entire industry to its core. That's precisely what happened to Meredith Jenkins, a high school science teacher in Copper Ridge, Nevada, who impulsively bid on a forgotten parcel of desert at a county tax auction. What she found beneath the sun-baked surface would not only change her life forever, but would ultimately save a dying town that had long since abandoned hope. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Nevada desert as Meredith Jenkins parked her weathered Toyota pickup at the edge of the Alderson Tract. 40 acres of seemingly worthless land stretched before her, all scrubby desert vegetation, rocky outcroppings, and a few twisted Joshua trees standing like silent sentinels across the unforgiving landscape. Not exactly prime real estate by anyone's definition, but as of yesterday, it was hers. At 42, Meredith didn't look like someone who would gamble her modest savings on desert wasteland. With her practical ponytail, faded jeans, and the perpetual smudge of chalk dust on her sleeves, remnants of 12 years teaching earth science at Copper Ridge High School, she projected sensible stability rather than risk-taking flair. The small Nevada town had been her home since she'd abandoned a promising career as a field geologist to raise her son as a single mother, trading unpredictable field expeditions for the steady routine of classroom lessons and parent-teacher conferences. But beneath her practical exterior burned the same curiosity that had once driven her to spend months in remote locations, cataloging rock formations and searching for mineral deposits. That flame had never quite died out, merely banked under years of responsibility and routine. Well, Mom, there it is, all yours. Jesse Jenkins, now 20, and home from his sophomore year studying environmental science at the University of Nevada, stood beside her at the property line. 40 acres of absolutely nothing, the biggest waste of $15,000 in recorded history. Meredith smiled at her son's dramatic assessment. Maybe, or maybe not. She pulled a topographical map from her back pocket, creased from repeated folding and unfolding over the past 2 weeks. There's something about the formation of these ridges, the way they run northeast to southwest. It reminds me of patterns I used to see in mineral-rich areas when I was working with Western exploration. Jesse rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Mom, come on. If there was anything valuable here, someone would have found it decades ago. This land has been picked over since the 1800s. Not necessarily. Meredith started walking, her eyes scanning the ground with practiced attention. The old-timers were looking for obvious signs: gold, silver, copper. They didn't have the technology or knowledge we have now. There are minerals nobody cared about back then that are worth fortunes today. The truth was, Meredith herself couldn't fully explain what had possessed her to attend the county tax auction 2 weeks earlier. She'd gone out of simple curiosity after seeing the notice in the Copper Ridge Gazette. The Alderson Tract had been seized for back taxes, the last piece of a once substantial holding that had been gradually sold off as the town's mining industry collapsed. When the auctioneer had struggled to get even the minimum bid of $10,000 for the parcel, something had stirred in Meredith. A combination of geological instinct and perhaps a middle-aged desire for something beyond the safe, predictable life she'd crafted. When she'd raised her hand and offered $15,000, nearly her entire savings, the room had fallen silent before erupting in poorly concealed laughter. Harold Winters, editor of the local newspaper, had cornered her afterward. Mind if I ask what possessed you to throw away good money on the Alderson wasteland? Planning to open a lizard sanctuary? His pen hovered over his notepad, eager for a quote that would make her sound as foolish as everyone clearly thought she was. Just an investment in the future, she'd replied vaguely, unwilling to voice the half-formed theories taking shape in her mind. Theories that now, standing on her property in the morning light, still seemed far-fetched even to her. Jessie had wandered ahead, kicking at rocks with the casual disinterest of youth. So what's the plan here? You going to build something? Because I'm telling you, Mum, that'd be a hard pass from any contractor I know. No building, Meredith replied, bending to examine an unusual rock formation. Just exploring for now. I'm going to survey the whole property, take some samples, run some tests. With what equipment? Your school doesn't exactly have a state-of-the-art geology lab. I've still got contacts at Western Nevada Mining College. I can use their facilities on the weekends. She straightened up, tucking a promising rock sample into her pocket. And I've been saving the good classroom equipment for summer projects anyway. Jessie looked skeptical, but knew better than to argue when his mother had that particular gleam in her eye. The one that had appeared when she'd helped him build an award-winning volcano in 4th grade, complete with actual mineral specimens from 5 different igneous formations. What neither of them knew as they surveyed the seemingly barren landscape was that news of Meredith's unusual purchase was already rippling through Copper Ridge's power structures, creating waves that would soon crash back upon her. At that very moment, in the wood-paneled conference room of the Copper Ridge Town Hall, Mayor Evelyn Cooper was reviewing development proposals with Victor Blackwell, whose Eagle Vista resort plans represented the town's best hope for economic revival in a generation. As you can see, Mayor Cooper, Blackwell said, his manicured finger tracing a line on the large map spread across the table, the Eagle Vista project will transform this entire area. Luxury accommodations, golf course, spa facilities, all designed to bring high-end tourism dollars to Copper Ridge. Mayor Cooper nodded, trying to look confident despite the desperation she felt. At 58, she'd spent her entire adult life watching Copper Ridge's slow decline after the broken pick mine closed. Population had dropped from 15,000 to barely 4,000. The high school graduated fewer students each year as families left for better opportunities elsewhere. Eagle Vista represented not just economic development, but survival itself. And the environmental impact? She asked, knowing that concerns about water usage in the desert were mounting among certain community factions. Minimal, Blackwell assured her with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Our architects have designed the most water-efficient golf course in the Southwest. And the jobs, Mayor Cooper, think of the jobs. The mayor nodded, already imagining her legacy as the leader who reversed Copper Ridge's decline. There's just one small complication, she said reluctantly. The Alderson Tract. It's been sold. Blackwell's smile vanished. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What? That's impossible. That land was supposed to go to auction next month. My people were tracking it. Apparently the county accelerated the timeline. It sold at auction 2 weeks ago. To whom? Blackwell demanded, his tone suddenly sharp. Local woman, high school teacher named Jenkins, paid $15,000. Blackwell relaxed slightly. A teacher? Perfect. She'll be happy to make a quick profit. Offer her $50,000. That's more than 3 times what she paid. I'll reach out to her, Mayor Cooper promised, though something about Meredith Jenkins's reputation for stubborn idealism made her doubt it would be that simple. Back at the Alderson Tract, Meredith had spent the morning collecting rock samples, carefully labeling each one with its precise location. Jessie had eventually gotten into the spirit of the expedition, using his phone to document coordinates and take photographs of interesting formations. "So, what exactly are you looking for?" he asked as they broke for lunch, sitting in the meager shade of a wind-sculpted boulder. Meredith unwrapped a sandwich, considering how to explain. "It's complicated, but there's something about the mineral composition here that doesn't match the surrounding geology. See those ridges?" She pointed to a formation in the distance. "They're angled differently than they should be for this region, and I've spotted traces of what might be specific indicator minerals." Indicator minerals? Certain minerals often appear alongside more valuable ones. They're like geological companions, nature's way of saying, "dig here." Jessie looked more interested now. "So there could actually be something valuable out here? Like what? Gold?" Meredith laughed. "Not gold. That's what everyone was hunting for originally, which might explain why they overlooked what I think might be here." She hesitated, unwilling to voice her theory until she had more evidence. "Let's just say, if I'm right, this land might be worth a lot more than what I paid for it." As the afternoon heat intensified, they collected the last samples and headed back to town. Meredith planned to spend the evening cataloging their findings before taking the most promising specimens to the community college lab on Saturday. When they pulled into the driveway of their modest ranch-style home on Elm Street, a glossy black SUV was parked at the curb. A tall man in an expensive suit that looked jarringly out of place in Copper Ridge leaned against it, checking his watch with obvious impatience. "Miss Jenkins?" He straightened as they got out of the truck. "Victor Blackwell. I was hoping we might have a word." Meredith recognized the name immediately. Blackwell Development was behind the proposed Eagle Vista resort that dominated local news. "Mr. Blackwell, this is unexpected." "I'll be inside, Mom," Jessie murmured, sensing tension as he carried their equipment into the house. Blackwell smiled with practiced charm. "I'll get right to the point, Miss Jenkins. I understand you recently acquired the Alderson Tract." "That's right. I'd like to purchase it from you. I'm prepared to offer $50,000, a very generous return on your investment in just 2 weeks. Meredith blinked, surprised by the directness of the offer. "May I ask why you're interested in that particular property?" "It's not exactly prime real estate. It adjoins land we've already secured for the Eagle Vista development. Having that parcel would allow us to expand certain amenities." He named the amount again, as if repetition might make it more enticing. $50,000? That's more than 3 times what you paid. Something about his eagerness triggered Meredith's caution. If the land was truly worthless, why offer so much? "I'm sorry, Mr. Blackwell, but it's not for sale. I have my own plans for the property." His smile tightened. "Ms. Jenkins, be reasonable. What could a high school teacher possibly do with 40 acres of desert scrub? This offer is well above market value." "Nevertheless, I'm not interested in selling," Meredith replied firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I've had a long day." As she turned toward her front door, Blackwell called after her, "$75,000, final offer." Meredith paused, her curiosity now fully aroused. The rapid increase suggested Blackwell knew something she didn't, or feared something she might discover. "The land is not for sale, Mr. Blackwell, at any price." The next morning, Meredith was meticulously organizing her rock samples when an unexpected knock came at her door. Opening it revealed Mayor Cooper on her porch, looking uncomfortable. "Evelyn, what brings you by on a Saturday?" Meredith asked, surprised. Though they knew each other from various school and town functions, they weren't exactly social friends. "May I come in, Meredith? I was hoping we could talk." In the living room, after declining offers of coffee, the mayor got straight to the point. "I understand you met with Victor Blackwell yesterday." "Word travels fast," Meredith observed dryly. "Copper Ridge is a small town, and the Eagle Vista project is important to us, to everyone. It could revitalize the entire community." Meredith leaned back in her chair. I'm aware of the project, Evelyn. What does that have to do with me? The Alderson Tract is critical to their development plans. Mr. Blackwell has authorized me to increase his offer to $100,000. Meredith stared at the mayor, calculating rapidly, from $15,000 to $100,000 in less than 24 hours. Something was definitely not adding up. What's really going on here, Evelyn? That land has been sitting vacant for decades. Suddenly it's worth a small fortune? The mayor shifted uncomfortably. The project needs that specific acreage for water rights and access. Without it, Eagle Vista might not be viable. Then Mr. Blackwell should have secured it before developing his plans, Meredith said coolly. I'm not selling. Mayor Cooper's professional demeanor slipped slightly. Meredith, be reasonable. This is the future of Copper Ridge we're talking about. Jobs, tax revenue, tourism. $100,000 is life-changing money for someone on a teacher's salary. My answer is still no. After the mayor left, Meredith sat surrounded by her rock samples, deep in thought. The escalating offers confirmed her suspicions that something valuable might be present on the property. But what exactly? And was it the same thing she suspected based on her preliminary observations? That afternoon, she loaded her most promising samples into her truck and drove to Western Nevada Mining College, where she'd arranged to use the geology lab. The campus was quiet on a Saturday, which suited her perfectly. The fewer people who knew what she was testing for, the better. As she ran the first samples through various tests, her mind returned to a research paper she'd co-authored during her geology career, focused on rare earth elements found in unusual desert formations. Those elements, with names like neodymium, dysprosium and terbium, had been scientific curiosities then. Now they were crucial components in everything from smartphones to electric vehicles to military equipment, and China controlled over 95% of the global supply. A domestic source of rare earth elements would be worth millions, possibly billions. But Meredith needed to be certain before she made any claims that would surely be met with skepticism. Hours later, as the lab equipment confirmed what she had begun to suspect, Meredith sat back in stunned silence. The preliminary results suggested concentrations of rare earth elements far above any reported domestic deposits. If verified, the Alderson Tract could be one of the most significant mineral discoveries in the continental United States in decades. She carefully secured her findings, suddenly aware of how valuable the information had become. Before going public, she would need independent verification from someone with unquestionable credentials. As she drove home through the darkening desert, a new concern emerged. If her discovery was as significant as she believed, simply owning the land wouldn't be enough. She lacked the resources to develop a mining operation. Larger interests would soon be circling, with Victor Blackwell likely first among them once he discovered what lay beneath the surface. Meredith needed an ally with mining experience and enough clout to help her navigate what was coming. And in Copper Ridge, there was only one person who fit that description. The following morning found Meredith knocking on the door of a small but well-maintained house on the outskirts of town. Raymond Ray Carter, former chief engineer of the Broken Pick mine, was something of a local legend, both for his mining expertise and for his dramatic testimony during the environmental hearings. That had ultimately led to the mine's closure. At 74, Ray still possessed the ramrod posture and penetrating gaze that had made younger engineers quake during his tenure at Broken Pick. He studied Meredith with undisguised curiosity as she explained her purchase of the Alderson Tract and the preliminary findings from her samples. Rare earths in the Alderson Formation? Ray's bushy eyebrows rose in surprise. No one's ever prospected that area for anything but traditional metals. Exactly, Meredith said, spreading her maps across his kitchen table. The old-timers were looking for gold and silver. Even copper was considered less desirable. Rare. Earth elements weren't commercially important back then. Ray examined her test results with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent a lifetime evaluating mineral reports. These concentrations, if they're accurate, I need your help to verify them properly, Meredith admitted. And then, I need advice on what to do next. Blackwell's already offering 6 figures without knowing what's really there. A hint of a smile appeared on Ray's weathered face. Blackwell, eh? That explains a few things. What do you mean? There were rumors years ago, nothing provable, that preliminary surveying for water sources on the Alderson land had turned up some unusual mineral signatures. The company involved was later acquired by one of Blackwell's subsidiaries. The findings were never made public. Meredith felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. So he might already suspect what's there. He might know exactly what's there, Ray corrected, but knowing and proving are different things in mining, and owning the land gives you the upper hand. Over the next 2 days, Meredith and Ray worked tirelessly, collecting additional samples and running more sophisticated tests using Ray's connections with former colleagues at larger mining operations. By Tuesday evening, they had confirmation. The Alderson Tract contained one of the richest deposits of rare earth elements ever discovered in North America. What now? Meredith asked as they sat in Ray's kitchen, surrounded by test results and geological surveys. I don't have the resources to develop this myself. No, but you have options, Ray said, pouring them both coffee. You could sell outright to a mining company, probably for 8 figures now that we know what's there. You could form a development, partnership maintaining partial ownership, or you could lease the mineral rights while retaining land ownership. What would you do? Ray considered the question carefully. I'd think about more than just the money. Rare earth mining has significant environmental implications. Done poorly, it can be devastating to the landscape and groundwater. Done right, it's still intensive, but can be managed responsibly. Meredith nodded, the environmental considerations weighing heavily on her mind as well. As a science teacher, she regularly taught her students about the consequences of poorly managed resource extraction. There's something else to consider, Ray added. Copper Ridge is dying, has been since Broken Pick closed. A new mining operation, a sustainable modern one, could revitalize the whole community. Before Meredith could respond, her phone rang. It was Jesse, his voice tense. Mom, you need to come home now. There's some kind of notice posted on our door, and 2 guys in suits have been taking photos of the house. By the time Meredith arrived home, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered on her lawn, examining the official-looking document posted on her front door. She pushed through them, ripping the notice from the door. What is it? Jesse asked, watching her face carefully. A notice of eminent domain proceedings, she said, scanning the legal language. The town is attempting to seize the Alderson Tract for essential public use. There's a special town council meeting tomorrow night to vote on it. Can they do that? Jesse looked stunned. They can try, Meredith replied, a steely determination in her voice that her son recognized from the rare occasions when she was truly angry. Word of the eminent domain proceedings spread through Copper Ridge like wildfire. By evening, Meredith's phone was ringing constantly with calls from curious neighbors and local business owners. The sudden interest in seemingly worthless desert land had everyone speculating, and the town was buzzing with rumors. The next morning, Harold Winters from the Copper Ridge Gazette appeared on her doorstep. Care to comment on the proceedings, Ms. Jenkins? What's so special about that land that the town and Blackwell Development are bending over backward to get it from you? Meredith considered her options carefully. Going public with her discovery prematurely could complicate things, but the eminent domain proceedings had forced her hand. She needed public opinion on her side. "Let's just say the Alderson Tract isn't as worthless as everyone thought," she replied carefully, "and Mr. Blackwell likely knows it. I'm prepared to present evidence at tonight's meeting that the land contains resources of significant economic and strategic value to the United States." Harold's journalistic instincts visibly sharpened. "What kind of resources are we talking about?" "Rare earth elements," Meredith said, making her decision. "Essential components for everything from smartphones to military equipment. Currently, we're almost entirely dependent on foreign sources. The Alderson deposit could change that and transform Copper Ridge in the process." The headline on the Gazette's hastily printed special edition that afternoon read, "Teacher's worthless land could contain valuable rare minerals. Town moves to seize property." By the time the town council meeting began that evening, the high school auditorium, the only venue large enough, was packed to capacity. Residents who hadn't attended a civic meeting in years crowded the seats, aisles, and stood along the walls. The buzz of conversation created a continuous background hum. At the front, the town council members shuffled papers nervously, clearly unprepared for the massive turnout. Mayor Cooper sat center, with Victor Blackwell conspicuously present in the front row. When Meredith entered alongside Ray Carter, a hush fell over the crowd. The respect accorded to the former mining engineer was evident as people nodded in. His direction, many whispering about the significance of his presence. Mayor Cooper called the meeting to order, explaining the eminent domain proposal with careful emphasis on the economic benefits the Eagle Vista Resort would bring to Copper Ridge. As she spoke, Meredith noted how she avoided any mention of the mineralogical value of the land, focusing solely on its use for resort access roads and water rights. When the floor opened for public comment, Meredith was the first to approach the microphone. Nervous but determined, she laid out what she and Ray had discovered. Test results, mineral concentrations, and expert assessments confirming the presence of one of North America's largest rare earth deposits. "The value of these minerals isn't just financial," she explained to the riveted audience. "Rare earth elements are critical for national security, renewable energy technology, and maintaining America's technological edge. Currently, we're almost entirely dependent on Chinese suppliers, creating a strategic vulnerability." She paused, looking directly at her neighbors and fellow townspeople rather than the council. Copper Ridge was built on responsible resource development. The Broken Pick mine provided good jobs and stability for generations. This discovery represents a chance to revitalize our community with a new generation of mining, one that balances economic opportunity with environmental stewardship. Ray Carter spoke next, his technical explanations lending crucial credibility to Meredith's claims. When he estimated the potential value of the deposit at billions, not millions, an audible gasp rippled through the auditorium. Victor Blackwell attempted to discredit their findings, suggesting that amateur analysis by a high school teacher and a retired engineer couldn't possibly be reliable. But his dismissive tone backfired, coming across as condescending to the very community he claimed to want to help. Frank Delgado, owner of the hardware store, stood up from the audience. "I've known Meredith Jenkins for 15 years. If she says those minerals are there, they're there. And I'd rather see mining jobs coming back to Copper Ridge than more service positions cleaning hotel rooms." A chorus of agreement followed his statement, with more residents standing to voice support for exploring the mining potential before rushing into any development decisions. As public sentiment clearly shifted in Meredith's favor, Mayor Cooper called a hasty recess for the council to confer. When they returned 30 minutes later, the mayor announced that the eminent domain proceeding would be tabled pending further investigation of the mineral claims by independent experts. It was a temporary victory, but a significant one. As the meeting adjourned, residents surrounded Meredith, asking questions and offering support. Many remembered the prosperity of the mining days and were visibly excited by the prospect of a revival, particularly one featuring advanced technology rather than traditional extraction. Victor Blackwell pushed through the crowd to reach her, his usual polished demeanor showing cracks of frustration. "This isn't over, Ms. Jenkins. A mining operation would take years to develop, require enormous capital investment, and face stringent environmental reviews. My offer, which I'm raising to $5 million, gives you immediate value without the uncertainty." The amount shocked Meredith, confirming just how valuable he believed the deposit to be. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Blackwell, but I'm not interested in selling to you. Any development of this resource will prioritize what's best for Copper Ridge and the environment, not quick profits." As Blackwell stalked away, Ray leaned closer to Meredith. "He's right about one thing. Developing a rare earth mine requires expertise and capital we don't have, but there are responsible mining companies who might partner with us on better terms than whatever Blackwell has in mind." "Us?" Meredith raised an eyebrow. The old engineer grinned. "Well, you're going to need a technical advisor with actual mining experience, aren't you? And I've been bored out of my mind since retirement, assuming you want a partner, that is." Meredith extended her hand. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather work with, Ray." The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Independent testing confirmed Meredith and Ray's findings, with experts declaring the Alderson deposit potentially world-class in both quality and quantity. Copper Ridge became the focus of national attention, with features in major newspapers and business publications. Multiple mining companies approached with development proposals. With Ray's guidance, Meredith navigated the complex negotiations, eventually partnering with a consortium committed to environmentally responsible extraction using innovative techniques that minimized waste and water usage. The initial public offering of Alderson Rare Earth Mining Corporation made Meredith a millionaire on paper, though she insisted on provisions that ensured substantial company investments in Copper Ridge itself, from education and infrastructure to environmental monitoring. Victor Blackwell's Eagle Vista project wasn't entirely defeated. The revised plan featured a smaller resort development that would leverage Copper Ridge's new status as a hub for technological minerals, marketing itself to business travelers as well as tourists. 1 year after her impulsive bid at the tax auction, Meredith stood with Jesse and Ray at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new mining operation. The crowd of townspeople and media representatives applauded as she turned the first ceremonial shovelful of earth. Mayor Cooper, who had adroitly shifted her political position to embrace the mining resurgence, presented Meredith with a key to the city. "From a high school science teacher to the woman who saved Copper Ridge," she announced to enthusiastic applause. As the formal ceremonies concluded, Jesse nudged his mother. "Not bad for a worthless piece of land, huh?" Meredith smiled, watching as former students approached to share how they were returning to Copper Ridge for the new technical jobs opening up. "The land was never worthless," she said. "People just weren't looking at it the right way." Ray nodded in agreement. "That's true of most things in life. Value isn't always obvious on the surface." Standing there under the Nevada sun, on land that generations had dismissed as worthless until she had seen its potential, Meredith reflected on how a single decision, a seemingly foolish bid at a tax auction, had transformed not just her life, but an entire community's future. The real treasure, she realized, wasn't just the rare earth elements buried beneath the surface. It was the renewed hope and purpose they had brought to a place that had nearly surrendered to despair, and that, perhaps, was the most valuable discovery of all. 5 years after Meredith's historic discovery, Alderson Rare Earth Mining Corporation had blossomed into a thriving enterprise that had utterly transformed Copper Ridge. The once dying town now buzzed with activity, its main street lined with renovated storefronts and new businesses that catered to the growing population of mining. Professionals, engineers, and researchers. The high school where Meredith had once taught now boasted state-of-the-art science and technology labs, funded by a generous endowment she had established using a portion of her considerable wealth. Many of her former students who had left town for better opportunities were returning, bringing families and expertise that further enriched the community. On this particular morning, Meredith stood at the edge of the mining operation, watching. As specialized equipment extracted ore from the ground using techniques that minimized environmental impact. Unlike the destructive methods of older mining operations, the Alderson facility employed cutting-edge technology that reduced waste, conserved water, and processed materials on-site to minimize transportation impacts. Hard to believe this was all empty desert 5 years ago, observed Ray Carter, who now served as the operation's chief technical advisor despite being well into his 70s. The years had added more lines to his weathered face, but his eyes remained sharp and attentive as he supervised the complex extraction process. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up and find it was all a dream," Meredith admitted. "That I'm still just a teacher with a crazy hunch about worthless land. Nothing crazy about trusting your expertise," Ray countered. "That's the difference between you and everyone else who looked at this land. They saw nothing because they didn't have the knowledge to see what was really there." Meredith's phone buzzed with a message from Jesse, now completing his doctorate in environmental engineering. His graduate research focused on developing even more sustainable methods for rare earth extraction, inspired by watching his mother's company pioneer new approaches. He was flying in later that day for an important announcement. As they walked back toward the administrative buildings, Ray pointed toward a sleek structure rising in the distance. Blackwell's Eagle Vista is finally taking shape. The resort had been dramatically reimagined from its original concept. Now marketed as the nation's first technological tourism destination, it featured educational exhibits about rare earth mining alongside its luxury accommodations. Victor Blackwell had eventually recognized that partnering with Alderson Rare Earth Mining was more profitable than fighting it, though the relationship remained strictly professional. "Meredith." The call came from Dr. Sophia Chen, head of the research division that had been established to explore new applications for the elements extracted from the Alderson site. "The results from the deep core samples are ready. You're going to want to see these." In the climate-controlled laboratory, Dr. Chen displayed a series of spectroscopic analyses on large screens. "We've identified concentrations of heavy rare earths at deeper levels than we initially surveyed. The deposit isn't just larger than we thought, it's potentially the most significant heavy rare earth deposit outside of China." The implications were enormous. Heavy rare earth elements, those with higher atomic weights, were even more valuable and strategically important than the lighter elements they had been extracting. These elements were crucial for next-generation technologies, from quantum computing to advanced medical imaging. "How deep?" Ray asked, his mind already calculating the engineering challenges. "At least 300 meters deeper than our current operation," Dr. Chen replied. "We'll need to completely redesign the extraction approach." Meredith studied the data, her scientific training allowing her to grasp the significance immediately. This could extend the operational lifespan of the mine by decades and significantly increase its strategic importance, added Dr. Chen. The Department of Defense has already reached out about securing priority access to certain elements for national security applications. The discovery of additional reserves at deeper levels would require substantial new investment, but would also secure Copper Ridge's economic future for generations to come. The town that had once faced extinction was now positioned to become a cornerstone of American technological independence. Later that afternoon, Meredith drove to the airport to pick up Jessie. At 25, her son had matured into a thoughtful young man whose childhood skepticism had transformed into a passionate commitment to environmentally responsible resource development. "You look tired, Mom," he observed as they embraced on the curb. "Good tired," she assured him. "We've had some exciting developments at the site, but what about you? Your message said you had news." Jessie grinned. "It can wait until dinner. Ray's joining us, right?" At Copper Canyon, a restaurant that had opened in the wake of the town's resurgence, the three shared a corner table with views of the mountains that gave the town its name. The establishment, like much of Copper Ridge, balanced respect for the region's mining heritage with modern sensibilities, its industrial chic decor incorporating salvaged equipment from the old broken pick mine alongside contemporary art by local craftspeople. "All right, out with it," Meredith said after they had ordered. "What's this news that required an in-person visit?" Jessie reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a thick document bound in a university cover. "My dissertation was accepted for publication by the Journal of Sustainable Resource Development. And..." He paused for dramatic effect. "I've been offered a position at MIT's Center for Critical Materials." Meredith's eyes widened. MIT's program was the most prestigious research center focused on rare earth elements and other critical minerals. "Jessie, that's incredible." "Congratulations, kid," Ray said, raising his glass in a toast. "They're lucky to have you." "But that's not all," Jessie continued, his expression turning serious. "Part of my work involves developing a new extraction method that could revolutionize how we process heavy, rare earths, making it significantly more environmentally friendly and cost-effective." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were preliminary designs for a processing system that would dramatically reduce the chemical inputs traditionally required for separating heavy, rare earth elements from surrounding materials. The approach combined innovations in bioremediation with advanced membrane technology. "I want to implement it here first," Jessie explained, "at Alderson. If it works as well in practice as it does in the lab, it could give us a competitive advantage that no one else can match. Not even the Chinese operations." Meredith studied the designs with growing excitement. Her son's innovation could potentially solve one of the most persistent challenges in rare earth mining, the environmental cost of separation and processing. The approach was elegant in its simplicity, yet revolutionary in its implications. "The MIT appointment doesn't start for 6 months, Jessie added. "I want to use that time to set up a pilot project here." "The board will need to approve it," Meredith cautioned, though she was already mentally composing her pitch. "But with these preliminary results, I don't see how they could say no." As they discussed the technical details, a familiar figure approached their table. Victor Blackwell, his hair now flecked with distinguished grey, stood before them in an impeccably tailored suit. "Miss Jenkins, Mr. Carter, young Mr. Jenkins," he acknowledged each of them with a nod. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Meredith replied politely. While she and Blackwell would never be friends, their business relationship had evolved into one of grudging mutual respect. "How are the final preparations for Eagle Vista coming along?" "On schedule for our grand opening next month," Blackwell said. "Actually, that's why I wanted to speak with you. We're hosting a VIP preview weekend, and I'd like to extend a personal invitation to the 3 of you." Meredith raised an eyebrow, surprised. Unexpectedly gracious of you, Mr. Blackwell. A hint of his old calculating smile appeared. Purely self-interest, I assure you. Having the heroes of Copper Ridge attend would be a publicity coup. Besides, our centerpiece exhibition features the story of the Alderson discovery. It would seem appropriate to have the principals there to verify its accuracy. After Blackwell departed, Ray chuckled. 5 years ago, he was trying to seize your land through eminent domain. Now he's building a museum exhibit about you. Life is full of ironies, Meredith agreed, though she remained wary of Blackwell's motives. The developer had adapted to the changing circumstances with remarkable agility, but she doubted his fundamental nature had changed. The following weeks were consumed with preparations for Jesse's pilot project. The board, recognizing the potential value of his innovation, approved funding with minimal resistance. A dedicated area of the facility was allocated for the experimental processing system, and specialized equipment began arriving from research centers around the country. Jesse assembled a team that included both experienced engineers from the existing operation and promising graduate students from his university network. The group brought diverse perspectives and expertise to the project, unified by a shared commitment to developing more sustainable approaches to critical mineral extraction. One afternoon, as Meredith observed the team assembling components of the pilot system, Mayor Cooper paid an unexpected visit to the site. Now in her third term, the mayor had become one of the most vocal champions of the mining operation, conveniently forgetting her earlier support for Blackwell's attempt to seize the land. Remarkable progress, she commented, watching the installation. The governor's office called this morning. They want to include Alderson in a national showcase of innovative American industries. There's talk of a presidential visit in the fall. That would be quite an honor, Meredith acknowledged, though privately she was more focused on the scientific and commercial implications of Jesse's work than on political recognition. The governor also mentioned that your name has been floated for the new Federal Critical Minerals Advisory Council, Mayor Cooper added casually. It would require significant time in Washington. Meredith shook her head firmly. Please thank the governor, but my place is here. Ray and I have built something special, and now with Jesse's project. This is where I can make the biggest difference. The mayor looked disappointed, but not surprised. Meredith's lack of political ambition was well known, though many found it puzzling given her influence and resources. What most failed to understand was that for Meredith, the true value of her discovery had never been personal wealth or power, but the opportunity to create something lasting and meaningful. As the pilot project neared completion, an unexpected crisis emerged. A major processing facility in China suddenly closed, sending shockwaves through global supply chains. Technology manufacturers worldwide, heavily dependent on Chinese rare earth supplies, faced potential production shutdowns that would ripple through the economy. Government officials contacted Alderson Rare Earth Mining with urgent requests to increase production to help fill the gap. The pressure was intense, with national security implications adding weight to the economic concerns. They're asking us to delay the pilot project and divert all resources to maximizing current production, Ray reported during an emergency meeting. The incentives they're offering are substantial. Jesse looked devastated. Delaying now would set us back months, maybe years. We'd lose team members to other projects, and the momentum we've built. Meredith considered the options carefully. The situation highlighted exactly why domestic rare earth production was so critical, the vulnerability created by over-reliance on foreign sources. Yet rushing to increase production using existing methods might compromise the very innovations that could provide long-term solutions. We don't have to choose, she decided finally. We'll increase current production as requested, but the pilot project continues as planned. We'll shift schedules, bring in additional personnel if needed, but we're not abandoning innovation when It's needed most. The decision meant 18-hour days for the leadership team, with Meredith often sleeping in her office to coordinate between the expanded production and the experimental project. The stress was immense, but so was the sense of purpose. What they were doing mattered, not just for Copper Ridge, but for the nation's technological and security future. 3 weeks into the crisis, Jesse's team achieved their first breakthrough. The experimental processing system successfully separated a batch of heavy rare earth elements with 40% less chemical input than conventional methods. The results were preliminary but promising enough to justify continued development even amid the production crunch. On a rare evening away from the facility, Meredith attended the VIP opening of Eagle Vista Resort, as promised. The development was impressive, a tasteful blend of desert architecture and luxury amenities that somehow managed to complement rather than dominate the landscape. The educational component was particularly well executed, with interactive exhibits explaining the importance of rare earth elements to modern technology. As she toured the exhibition dedicated to the Alderson discovery, Meredith was surprised by its accuracy and respectful tone. The narrative presented was largely truthful, acknowledging both the town's initial skepticism and the visionary insight that had led to the transformative find. Well, does it meet with your approval? Victor Blackwell appeared at her side, watching her reaction carefully. It's remarkably fair, Meredith admitted, though I notice it glosses over the eminent domain attempt. Blackwell shrugged elegantly. Ancient history. Besides, the exhibition focuses on success, not conflict. Your success has, after all, benefited us all. He gestured toward the resort's grand lobby, where business executives and technology industry leaders mingled. Copper Ridge is becoming a nexus for technological innovation, attracting visitors who would never have come for a traditional resort alone. Later that evening, as Meredith stood on the resort's terrace overlooking the desert landscape, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just 5 years. From a high school teacher with modest savings to the founder of a company, valued at billions, her transformation mirrored that of the land itself, seemingly worthless until someone recognized its hidden potential. Yet the external changes, significant as they were, felt less important than the internal ones. The discovery had given her the opportunity to reunite her two passions, scientific exploration and education. The research facility she had established employed numerous former students, and the educational foundation she had created was providing opportunities for a new generation to pursue scientific careers. Ray joined her on the terrace, his weathered face illuminated by the desert moonlight. "Penny for your thoughts." "Just thinking about value," Meredith replied. "How it's rarely where or what we expect it to be. Like rare earth elements themselves," Ray observed. "Invisible to most but fundamental to everything. You can't see neodymium or dysprosium with the naked eye, but without them, none of these people could make a phone call or take a digital photo of this view." The crisis accelerated Jesse's project in unexpected ways. The urgent need for increased production created a perfect testing ground for his innovations, with real-world conditions providing insights that laboratory simulations never could. By the time the Chinese facility resumed operations 3 months later, the pilot project had advanced far beyond its original timeline. The processing system, now proven effective at commercial scale, reduced environmental impact while increasing efficiency, a rare combination in resource extraction. Patent applications were filed and industry publications began featuring the breakthrough as a potential game changer for rare earth processing worldwide. Jesse's appointment at MIT evolved into a joint position that allowed him to divide his time between academic research and practical implementation at Alderson. His work attracted promising young scientists and engineers to Copper Ridge. Further, diversifying the town's intellectual and cultural landscape. The presidential visit materialized as predicted, bringing national attention to both the mining operation and the broader revitalization of Copper Ridge. Standing alongside Jesse and Ray as they demonstrated the innovative processing system to government officials, Meredith felt a profound sense of validation. "Your discovery has implications far beyond mining," the president commented during a private moment. "It's a reminder of what makes America exceptional, the ability to see value where others don't, and to transform that vision into reality through innovation and hard work." Meredith nodded, thinking of her impulsive bid at the tax auction. 5 years earlier, a moment of insight that had seemed foolish to everyone but her. "Sometimes the most valuable things are right in front of us," she replied. "We just need the right knowledge to recognize them." As the official entourage moved on, Meredith remained behind for a moment, looking out over the operation that had sprung from barren desert. The facility represented far more than just a successful business venture. It was a testament to the power of expertise, determination, and vision to transform not just land, but lives. In a world obsessed with quick profits and instant results, the Alderson discovery offered a different lesson: that true value often requires the patience to look beneath the surface, the knowledge to recognize what others miss, and the courage to act on that insight despite skepticism and opposition. It was a lesson that Meredith hoped would inspire others to look more carefully at the worthless things around them, whether land, people, or ideas, and consider what hidden potential might be waiting to be discovered. 10 years had passed since Meredith Jenkins's momentous discovery at the Alderson Tract. What had once been a desperate gamble with her life savings had evolved into an enterprise that redefined not just Copper Ridge, but America's position in the global rare earth market. On this crisp autumn morning, Meredith walked through the Copper Ridge Technology Institute, a sprawling campus that had risen on the edge of town. Students and researchers from around the world now came to study cutting-edge mineral extraction and processing techniques pioneered at Alderson Rare Earth Mining Corporation. At 52, Meredith carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had weathered storms, both literal and figurative. Her once practical ponytail had given way to a stylish silver bob, though she still preferred sensible clothing to the designer labels her wealth could easily afford. The former high school teacher now held guest lecturer status at 3 prestigious universities, though she limited her appearances to maintain her focus on the operations that had become her life's work. The tour group from the United Nations is waiting in the East Conference Room, her assistant reminded her as they passed through the Institute's central atrium. Representatives from 12 nations interested in developing their own sustainable mining programs. Meredith nodded, mentally reviewing the key points she wanted to emphasize. In recent years, her role had evolved beyond managing the mining operation to becoming a global advocate for responsible resource development. The Alderson model, combining cutting-edge technology with strict environmental standards and community investment, had become a template studied worldwide. The conference room buzzed with multiple languages as she entered, conversations pausing as delegates recognized her arrival. Unlike a decade ago, when she had nervously addressed the Copper Ridge Town Council, Meredith now spoke confidently to international audiences about complex technical and policy matters. "Welcome to Copper Ridge," she began after introductions were complete. "What you'll see today represents 10 years of continuous innovation, but more importantly, 10 years of partnership between industry, community, and environment. We don't believe these interests need to be in conflict." As she outlined the Alderson approach, Meredith recognized a familiar face at the back of the room. Ray Carter, now 84, sat observing with quiet pride. Though officially retired, for the second time, The former mining engineer still served as a special advisor, his institutional knowledge invaluable despite the decades that had passed since his days at Broken Pick Mine. After the formal presentation, Ray joined her for the walking tour of the facility. "They're impressed," he noted, nodding toward the delegates who were examining processing equipment with evident interest. Particularly the representatives from Mongolia and Kazakhstan. They've got significant rare earth deposits, but concerns about environmental impacts. "We've come a long way from hosing down tailings piles and hoping for the best," Meredith agreed, referencing the primitive environmental practices that had once been industry standard. The Alderson operation now utilized closed-loop processing systems, sophisticated water reclamation technology, and innovative approaches to waste management that had dramatically reduced the ecological footprint of rare earth mining. As they approached the newest section of the facility, Meredith felt a familiar surge of pride. The Advanced Processing Center housed technology developed by her son Jesse, now recognized as one of the leading innovators in sustainable mineral extraction. His bio-leaching process had revolutionized how certain rare earth elements were separated from ore, reducing chemical inputs by over 70% while increasing recovery rates. Dr. Jenkins is demonstrating the Phase 3 system today, the tour guide explained to the delegates, referring to Jesse by his academic title. At 30, he divided his time between research, teaching at the institute, and overseeing implementation of his innovations at mining sites around the world. Jesse looked up from the control panel he was adjusting, offering a quick wave to his mother before returning to his explanation of the process for the visiting officials. His enthusiasm for the technical details reminded Meredith powerfully of herself at that age, during her early days as a field geologist, before family responsibilities had temporarily diverted her career. "You must be very proud," observed a delegate from Finland, noticing the family resemblance, "of the technology or the technologist?" Meredith asked with a smile. "Both, I imagine," the delegate replied. "It's rare to see multiple generations contribute so significantly to advancing an industry." After the tour concluded, Meredith met with several delegates individually to discuss specific aspects of the Alderson model that might be applicable to their national contexts. Years of experience had taught her that there was no one-size-fits-all approach to responsible resource development. Geological, economic, and cultural differences meant each implementation required careful adaptation. By late afternoon, she was finally able to break away for her weekly meeting with the Copper Ridge Community Foundation, the organization she had established to manage a significant portion of the wealth generated by the mining operation. The foundation had become a powerful force for positive change, funding everything from educational initiatives to healthcare access to cultural preservation efforts. The foundation's headquarters occupied a beautifully restored historic building on Main Street that had once housed the town's original assay office. Inside, the modern conference room contrasted with the preserved architectural details, a visual representation of how Copper Ridge had managed to honor its mining heritage while embracing a technology-focused future. The Scholarship Committee has finished reviewing this year's applications, reported Diana Reyes, the Foundation's executive director and a former student of Meredith's. "We have 36 qualified candidates for the STEM program and 22 for the environmental studies track." "Can we fund them all?" Meredith asked, reviewing the budget projections. "If we reduce the individual amounts by about 12%, yes," Diana confirmed. "Or we could maintain the current award levels and select the top 20 in each category." "Fund them all," Meredith decided without hesitation. "These are local kids who want to pursue education that could bring them back to Copper Ridge with valuable skills. That's exactly what this community needs for long-term sustainability. The rest of the meeting covered ongoing projects, the community health center expansion, a renewable energy initiative for municipal buildings, and a proposal to establish a cultural exchange program with mining communities in other countries. The Foundation's work had expanded well beyond Meredith's initial vision, becoming an essential part of Copper Ridge's revitalization strategy. As the meeting concluded, Frank Delgado, the hardware store owner who had been one of Meredith's first supporters during the eminent domain battle, approached with evident excitement. Now in his 70s, Frank remained deeply involved in community affairs, serving as the Foundation's liaison to local small businesses. The Historical Society finished digitizing the old mining records, he announced. They found something you might find interesting: geological surveys from 1887 that mentioned unusual mineral formations in the Alderson area. The prospectors noted them, but didn't recognize their significance. The elements we're mining now wouldn't have had any value back then, Meredith reflected, accepting the tablet Frank offered. The scanned documents showed hand-drawn maps and notes in faded script, recording observations from a time when rare earth elements were scientific curiosities rather than technological necessities. Look at this notation, Frank pointed to a particular passage. Strange greenish minerals of no apparent commercial value. They were probably looking at cerium compounds without realizing what they were seeing. Meredith smiled at the historical irony. They were standing on a fortune and had no idea. Just like everyone else who dismissed the Alderson Tract as worthless, Frank replied, until you came along. After dinner with Jesse and Ray at Copper and Sage, an upscale restaurant that would have been unimaginable in pre-discovery Copper Ridge, Meredith drove up to a viewpoint overlooking the valley. The lights of the town and the mining operation created a constellation against the desert darkness, a visual representation of the transformation a decade had brought. Her phone rang as she sat contemplating the view. The caller ID showed a Washington, D.C. area code, likely someone from the Department of Energy or the Critical Minerals Task Force, both of which consulted with her regularly on policy matters. Ms. Jenkins, Secretary Williams here. I apologize for calling after hours, but we've received some intelligence I thought you should be aware of immediately. Meredith straightened, recognizing the voice of the Cabinet Secretary. No apology necessary, Mr. Secretary. What's happening? We've confirmed reports that the Chinese government is planning to announce new export restrictions on heavy rare earths next week. They're positioning it as an environmental measure, but our analysts believe it's a strategic move to pressure Western technology manufacturers. The news wasn't entirely surprising. China had used its dominant position in rare earth production as leverage during previous diplomatic disputes. What made this situation different was the timing, coming just as several major American defense contractors were scaling up production of next-generation systems that relied heavily on these materials. How severe are the restrictions expected to be? Meredith asked, her mind already calculating implications. Potentially a 60% reduction in export quotas for elements like dysprosium and terbium, the secretary replied grimly. Precisely the elements crucial for the systems we've discussed. Meredith considered the situation. The Alderson operation was currently the largest producer of heavy rare earths outside of China, but even at full capacity, it couldn't immediately fill a gap that large. The secondary mining sites that had been developed in recent years, some, with her consultation, were still scaling up. The President is convening a task force tomorrow, the Secretary continued. Your presence would be extremely valuable, given your expertise and Alderson's position in the market. I'll be on the first flight to Washington, Meredith promised. In the meantime, I can have our team prepare production scenarios for increasing output of the critical elements." After ending the call, Meredith sat for a moment longer, watching the lights of the operation that had transformed her life. The irony wasn't lost on her. The worthless land she had purchased on a hunch was now central to matters of national security and international relations. The next morning found her boarding a private jet provided by the government, a far cry from the commercial flights with multiple connections she had once relied on for professional travel. Jesse joined her, his expertise in processing technology, potentially crucial to developing rapid response solutions. "I've been working on approaches that could increase yields of heavy rare earths by approximately 22%, he explained during the flight, sharing technical specifications on his tablet. "The challenge will be implementing the modifications without disrupting current production flows. That would help, but we'd still be looking at a significant shortfall if the Chinese restrictions are as severe as predicted," Meredith noted, reviewing the projections. "We need a more comprehensive approach." By the time they landed in Washington, Meredith had outlined a strategy that combined increased production at Alderson, accelerated development at secondary sites, and a cooperative agreement with allied nations that had smaller rare earth operations. The approach wouldn't completely offset the Chinese restrictions, but it would provide critical breathing room for technology manufacturers and defense contractors. The meeting at the White House convened representatives from multiple agencies, major technology companies, and defense contractors. As one of the few participants with deep expertise in both the technical and business aspects of rare earth production, Meredith found herself central to discussions that would shape national policy. "The reality is that we've known this vulnerability existed for decades," she observed during a particularly tense exchange. "What we're experiencing now is the consequence of treating rare earth elements as commodity minerals rather than strategic resources." Her proposed strategy received support from both government and industry representatives, though implementation would require intensive coordination. By the end of the day, she had been formally appointed to head a public-private task force charged with developing domestic rare earth resilience. "This wasn't how I planned to spend the next 6 months," she admitted to Jesse as they left the meeting. "But this is exactly why we developed the Alderson operation the way we did, to create a secure domestic source for these critical materials." The weeks that followed were a blur of activity as Meredith divided her time between Washington, Copper Ridge, and visits to other mining operations that were part of the resilience strategy. The Chinese restrictions were announced as predicted, sending shockwaves through technology markets and elevating rare earth elements from obscure industrial inputs to topics of mainstream news coverage. Alderson Rare Earth Mining Corporation became a focal point of national attention, with journalists descending on Copper Ridge to report on the operation that was suddenly vital to American technological independence. Many focused on the overnight millionaire narrative, fascinated by how a high school teacher's impulsive purchase had positioned her at the center of international resource politics. What most reporting missed was how thoroughly prepared Meredith had been for this moment. Her geological expertise, research background, and decade of operational experience had created both the technical capability and the strategic vision necessary to respond effectively to the crisis. 3 months into the Chinese restrictions, the resilience strategy was showing results. Alderson's production of critical, heavy, rare earths had increased by nearly 30% thanks to Jesse's innovations and round-the-clock operations. Secondary sites were being developed at unprecedented speed, with expedited permitting processes and government incentives accelerating timelines. Most significantly, public awareness of rare earth elements had fundamentally shifted. What had once been obscure materials known only to specialists were now recognized as strategic resources essential to modern technology and national security. Political support for domestic production had solidified across partisan lines, ensuring continued investment in the sector. As the immediate crisis stabilized, Meredith found herself facing new decisions about Alderson's future. The company had grown far beyond her original vision, with operations or partnerships on 3 continents and a workforce numbering in the thousands. Her role had evolved into something between corporate leader, scientific advisor, and public policy advocate, a combination that left increasingly little time for the hands-on work she most enjoyed. One evening, as she reviewed acquisition proposals for a promising deposit in Wyoming, Ray Carter joined her in her office at the Copper Ridge headquarters. At 85, he moved more slowly now, but retained the sharp strategic mind that had made him such a valuable partner from the beginning. "You look tired," he observed bluntly, "and not the good kind of tired you used to talk about." Meredith sighed, setting aside the documents. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's known you for a decade," Ray replied. "You're doing too much, spreading yourself too thin. That's not sustainable, and you know it better than anyone." He was right, of course. The crisis had pushed her already demanding schedule to unsustainable levels, with 80-hour weeks becoming the norm rather than the exception. The work was important, even vital, but the pace was taking a toll on both her health and her satisfaction. "What would you suggest?" she asked, genuinely interested in his perspective. Ray had navigated several major career transitions during his long life, always seeming to know when to shift focus. "You founded this company to do things differently," he reminded her, "to prove that rare earth mining could be environmentally responsible, community-focused, and profitable. You've done that and more." He gestured toward the window, where the lights of Copper Ridge glowed against the desert night. "Maybe it's time to focus more on the research and innovation side, the parts that energize you, and less on the day-to-day, operations and politics." The suggestion resonated more strongly than she had expected. Meredith had always found her greatest satisfaction in solving technical challenges and developing new approaches, not in managing corporate structures or navigating political complexities. "I've been thinking about establishing a dedicated research institute," she admitted. "Independent but aligned with the company, focused on developing next-generation extraction and processing technologies. Something that could advance the entire field, not just our operations." Ray nodded approvingly. "That sounds exactly like where you could make the most meaningful contribution going forward. Let the business people handle the business, and the politicians handle the politics. You focus on the science and innovation." The conversation planted a seed that grew rapidly in the following weeks. With characteristic thoroughness, Meredith developed a comprehensive plan for the Alderson Institute for Sustainable Resource Development, an independent research organization that would advance technologies for environmentally responsible mineral extraction and processing. The institute would be housed in a state-of-the-art facility adjacent to the original mining operation, allowing researchers easy access to working extraction and processing systems. Funding would come from an endowment drawn from Meredith's personal holdings in Alderson rare earth mining, ensuring independence from short-term corporate or political pressures. Most importantly, the institute would focus on open-source innovation, developing technologies that would be available to operations worldwide, accelerating the transition to more sustainable practices across the industry. This approach reflected Meredith's belief that environmental responsibility shouldn't be a competitive advantage, but a standard practice. 6 months later, as the Chinese restrictions began to ease in the face of international pressure and expanded production elsewhere, ground was broken on the Institute's campus. The ceremony attracted less media attention than the crisis response had, but to Meredith, it represented something more significant, a legacy that would extend beyond immediate market conditions or political tensions. Jesse, who had accepted a leadership role in the Institute's research program while maintaining his academic affiliations, stood beside her as the first ceremonial shovelful of earth was turned. "Full circle," he observed quietly. "Another groundbreaking on the land everyone thought was worthless." Meredith smiled, remembering that first day when they had surveyed the Alderson Tract together, Jesse skeptical, and she driven by a hunch she couldn't fully articulate. "Not quite full circle," she corrected, "more like a spiral, returning to a similar point but at a different level." Victor Blackwell, who had been invited out of professional courtesy rather than personal connection, approached as the formal ceremony concluded. Now in his 60s, the developer had maintained his polished appearance despite the passage of years, though his hair had turned completely silver. "Congratulations on another visionary project," he offered with practiced charm. "The Institute is an impressive concept. If I may ask, why open source? Surely the technologies you develop will have substantial commercial value." It was a fundamentally revealing question, highlighting the difference in their worldviews that had existed from the beginning. "Because some things are more important than maximizing profit," Meredith replied simply. "The challenges we're addressing, resource scarcity, environmental impact, community sustainability, affect everyone. The solutions should be available to everyone as well." Blackwell nodded, though it was clear he didn't fully comprehend her perspective. "Well, it's certainly a magnanimous approach. Eagle Vista continues to benefit from its association with your operation, so I suppose I shouldn't question your business philosophy." As he moved away to network with other attendees, Ray chuckled beside her. "A decade later, and he still doesn't get it. To him, the only value is the one that shows up on a balance sheet." "Everyone sees the world through their own lens," Meredith replied without judgment. "His perspective made him successful in his field, just as my geological background let me see value in this land when others couldn't." The gathering transitioned to a reception at the recently opened Copper Ridge Museum of Mining and Innovation, a facility that chronicled the town's evolution from its 19th century origins through the broken pick era to the rare earth renaissance. The central exhibit featured the story of the Alderson discovery, including the original rock samples that Meredith and Jesse had collected on that first exploratory day. As she examined the display, Meredith was approached by a young woman she recognized as a recent graduate of Copper Ridge High School's science program. "Ms. Jenkins, I just wanted to thank you personally. I received one of the Foundation's scholarships for environmental engineering. I start at Colorado School of Mines next month." "Congratulations," Meredith replied warmly. "That's an excellent program. Do you have a particular focus in mind?" "Remediation technologies for legacy mining sites," the young woman explained with evident passion. "I grew up hearing about how the Alderson operation set new standards for environmental responsibility, but there are so many older sites that need better solutions for addressing their long-term impacts." It was exactly the kind of thinking Meredith had hoped to inspire when she established the scholarship program. Young people applying scientific rigor to solving environmental challenges rather than simply criticizing extractive industries. "The Institute will be looking for interns next summer," she mentioned. "You should apply." Later that evening, as twilight painted the desert in shades of purple and gold, Meredith returned to the viewpoint where she had received the call about the Chinese export restrictions nearly a year earlier. The perspective offered a panoramic view of everything that had grown, from her impulsive bid at the tax auction, the mining operation, the institute under construction, and the revitalized town of Copper Ridge spreading across the valley floor. Jesse joined her there, the two sitting in comfortable silence as they watched the desert stars emerge. "I've been thinking about that first day we came out here," he finally said. "How I told you buying this land was the biggest waste of $15,000 in recorded history." Meredith laughed at the memory. You weren't the only one who thought so. What made you so certain? Jesse asked, a question he had posed in various forms over the years, never quite satisfied with her answers. What did you see that no one else could? Meredith considered the question carefully, wanting to articulate something that had always been partly intuitive. It wasn't certainty, she said finally. It was possibility. I had just enough geological knowledge to recognize patterns that suggested potential, and just enough courage to act on that recognition, despite the skepticism. She gestured toward the sprawling operation below them. Everything that's happened since, the mining, the research, the community development, has built on that initial moment of seeing possibility where others saw nothing of value. As darkness enveloped the desert, the lights of Copper Ridge shimmered like earthbound stars, a constellation of possibility made manifest through knowledge, determination, and a willingness to look beyond the surface to recognize the true, a value hidden beneath. The greatest treasures, Meredith reflected, are often buried under what others have dismissed as worthless. The challenge is having the knowledge to recognize them and the courage to unearth them, even when everyone around you sees nothing but desert wasteland. Jesse nodded thoughtfully, and being willing to share them once they're found. Especially then, Meredith agreed, thinking of the Institute and its mission of open source innovation. Because the real value isn't in hoarding resources, but in using them to create something lasting, something that extends beyond ourselves. As they drove back toward town, Meredith felt a sense of completion that had been elusive during the frantic pace of the past year. The worthless land had yielded treasures far more varied and meaningful than simply the rare earth elements beneath its surface. It had provided opportunities for an entire community, a platform for environmental innovation, and most personally, a chance for her to fully integrate her scientific expertise with her desire to create positive change. The journey from that impulsive bid at a tax auction to this moment had not been straightforward or easy. It had required technical knowledge, strategic thinking, and resilience in the face of opposition. But looking back, Meredith wouldn't have changed a single decision, even the ones that had seemed foolhardy at the time, because sometimes, she had learned, the greatest wisdom lies in recognizing the extraordinary potential in what others have, deemed worthless, whether land, ideas, or people. And in that recognition lies the possibility of transformation, not just for the one who sees, but for entire communities, and perhaps even beyond. 20 years had transformed the Alderson Tract, from a dusty patch of worthless desert into the beating heart of America's rare earth industry. What Meredith Jenkins had once purchased for $15,000, nearly her entire savings as a high school science teacher, had become the foundation of an enterprise valued at over $12 billion, employing thousands and reshaping both national security policy and global mineral markets. On this particular morning, a sleek, autonomous vehicle carried Meredith along the perimeter road that circled the vast complex. At 62, she retained the keen observational skills and analytical mind that had first led her to recognize the land's potential when everyone else saw only worthless scrub. Her hair had turned completely silver, framing a face lined with experience but still animated by curiosity and determination. "Morning inspection?" asked the vehicle's AI assistant, its voice calibrated to a pleasant tone that Meredith found neither too synthetic nor uncannily human. "Not exactly," she replied, gazing out at the operation that had grown far beyond her initial vision. "More of a farewell tour." Tomorrow would mark a significant transition as Meredith formally stepped down as chairperson of Alderson Rare Earth Mining Corporation, retaining only her role as director of the Alderson Institute for Sustainable Resource Development. After 2 decades of balancing corporate leadership with scientific innovation, she had decided to focus exclusively on the research that remained her greatest passion. The autonomous vehicle glided silently past the original extraction site, now a showcase for ecological restoration techniques. Once the rare earth deposits had been exhausted in this section, Meredith had insisted on implementing a comprehensive remediation program that went far beyond regulatory requirements. Now, native desert vegetation flourished alongside carefully engineered systems that continued to monitor soil and groundwater quality. "We should make an unscheduled stop at Processing Center 3, Meredith instructed the vehicle, noticing unusual activity around the facility that specialized in separating heavy rare earth elements from raw ore. As the vehicle changed course, Meredith received an incoming call. The holographic display projected the image of her son, Jesse, now 40, and serving as the company's chief innovation officer. At his side was Sophia Chung, the brilliant materials scientist who had become both his research partner and life partner over the past 7 years. "Mom, perfect timing," Jesse began without preamble. "We've just completed the final verification tests on the quantum separation process. It works. Even better than our models predicted. 97% extraction efficiency with minimal energy inputs." "That's extraordinary," Meredith replied, understanding immediately the significance of this breakthrough. Conventional rare earth processing required intensive chemical treatments and significant energy consumption. The quantum approach they had been developing promised to revolutionize the industry again, just as her original discovery had 20 years earlier. "We're implementing the first production-scale system at Processing Center 3 right now," Sophia added, her excitement evident despite the professional composure she typically maintained. "The engineers worked through the night to complete the installation. We should be ready for demonstration by this afternoon." "I'm heading there now," Meredith informed them, pleased that her instincts about the unusual activity had been correct. "I'll see you shortly." As the call ended, Meredith couldn't help smiling at the synchronicity. Her last full day as chairperson would coincide with the implementation of a technology that represented the future of the industry she had helped transform. There was a poetic symmetry to the timing that appealed to her scientific appreciation. For patents, Processing Center 3 hummed with purposeful activity as Meredith arrived. Engineers and technicians moved between monitoring stations, making final adjustments to equipment that bore little resemblance to the massive chemical processing systems that had dominated rare earth extraction for decades. The quantum separation technology utilized precisely calibrated electromagnetic fields to isolate specific elements at the atomic level, dramatically reducing both environmental impact and processing costs. Meredith, the familiar voice, belonged to Raymond Carter, who approached with the assistance of an exoskeletal mobility aid. At 94, Ray had outlived most of his contemporaries, his longevity attributed to both good genes and the sense of purpose that his continued involvement with Alderson operations provided. Though physically frail, his mind remained razor-sharp, and he still served as an advisor emeritus to both the corporation and the Institute. "I should have known you'd be here for this," Meredith greeted him warmly. Their friendship, forged during the early days when they had confirmed the rare earth deposit and defended it against Victor Blackwell's attempts to seize the land, had deepened into one of the most important relationships in her life. "Wouldn't miss it," Ray replied, his eyes twinkling with the same enthusiasm that had characterized him since their first meeting. From conventional mining engineer to quantum material separation, quite a journey for an old dog like me. Jesse and Sophia joined them, bringing up a holographic display that showed real-time data from the system's initial calibration phase. The four of them stood together, representatives of 3 generations of scientific innovation, watching as the technology they had collectively developed began its operational debut. "Initial separation sequence initiating," announced the automated system. On the molecular visualization display, they could observe the process that was invisible to the naked eye, individual rare earth elements being identified, isolated, and directed to separate collection systems with unprecedented precision. "It's beautiful," Sophia murmured, watching the atomic-level choreography with the appreciation of someone who understood both the scientific principles and the years of research that had made this moment possible. The first complete processing cycle completed in 17 minutes, less than 1/10 the time required by conventional methods. When the purity analysis appeared on the display, showing 99.8% separation for the critical elements, spontaneous. Applause broke out among the technical team. "You've done it," Meredith told Jesse and Sophia, genuine pride evident in her voice. "This changes everything again." "We built on the foundation you created," Jesse replied. 20 years ago, you recognized what this land could provide when no one else saw anything of value. We're just continuing that tradition of seeing possibilities others miss." As the technical team continued monitoring the system's performance, Meredith stepped aside with Ray, finding a quiet corner in the facility's observation area. "So tomorrow's really the day," he noted, "the official changing of the guard." Meredith nodded, gazing out at the operation that had grown from their early collaboration. "It's time. The corporate side needs leadership that understands the business challenges ahead, and I need to focus on the research that still excites me." "Any regrets?" Ray asked, knowing her well enough to ask the question directly. "Not about stepping down," she replied thoughtfully, "but sometimes I wonder about the roads not taken. If I hadn't attended that tax auction on a whim 20 years ago, where would I be now? Still teaching high school science? Would someone else have discovered what was here? Or would it still be sitting untouched, dismissed as worthless desert?" Ray chuckled. "The universe has a way of finding the right people for important discoveries. If not you, someone would have eventually realized what was here, but they might not have developed it with the same vision or principles. That's where you made the real difference, not just in finding the minerals, but in how you chose to extract and use them." Their conversation was interrupted by an alert on Meredith's personal device. "The international delegation has arrived at the Institute," she noted. "I should head over there to welcome them." The Alderson Institute for Sustainable Resource Development occupied a striking campus adjacent to the original mining operation, designed to harmonize with the desert landscape rather than dominate it. The facility's architecture incorporated advanced environmental technologies alongside aesthetic elements that honored the region's natural beauty and cultural heritage. As her vehicle approached the institute, Meredith was struck anew by how thoroughly Copper Ridge had been transformed in the 2 decades since her discovery. The once struggling town of 4,000 had grown to a vibrant community of nearly 30,000, with the institute and the mining operation serving as the twin engines of its renaissance. Unlike many boomtowns that experienced unsustainable growth followed by eventual decline, Copper Ridge had developed with careful planning and substantial investment in infrastructure and quality of life. The Copper Ridge Community Foundation, funded primarily through Meredith's personal wealth and Alderson corporate contributions, had ensured that prosperity was broadly shared through educational programs, affordable housing initiatives, and cultural institutions that made the town an attractive place to live and work. The international delegation waiting at the Institute represented a significant milestone in global resource policy. 17 nations had committed to adopting the Alderson Principles, a framework for environmentally responsible extraction and processing of critical minerals that Meredith had helped develop over the past decade. Today's ceremony would formalize this commitment and establish a collaborative research program to implement these principles at resource sites worldwide. Dr. Helena Voss, the Institute's executive director, greeted Meredith as she arrived. "Perfect timing," she said. The German and Korean representatives were just asking about the quantum separation technology. News travels fast in scientific circles. "We've just completed the first full-scale processing cycle," Meredith confirmed. "The results exceeded even our optimistic projections. We'll be able to include a demonstration in this afternoon's tour." The morning session featured presentations on various aspects of the Alderson approach, from initial geological assessment through extraction, processing, and site remediation. What made these presentations particularly powerful was that they weren't merely theoretical. Each concept could be observed in actual operation at the adjacent mining facility. During a break, Meredith found herself approached by the representative from China, Dr. Li Wei, whose presence at the gathering reflected a significant shift in international mineral politics. For decades, China had maintained dominance in the rare earth market, using its position strategically for economic and geopolitical advantage. The rise of Alderson and subsequent American operations had fundamentally altered this dynamic, creating a more balanced global market. "Dr. Jenkins," he greeted her with formal respect. "I must congratulate you on what you've built here. Many in my country dismissed the significance of your discovery when news first broke 20 years ago. That was clearly a miscalculation." "Thank you, Dr. Li," Meredith replied diplomatically, "though I've always maintained that there's room for multiple approaches in this sector. China's early recognition of rare earth importance gave you a significant head start." He nodded, acknowledging the gracious framing of their country's complex competition. "Perhaps, but your innovations in environmental mitigation have forced all producers to reconsider their methods. My government has committed substantial resources to implementing similar approaches at our major extraction sites." This admission represented a remarkable evolution. Early Chinese rare earth operations had prioritized production volume over environmental considerations, creating significant ecological damage that was only now being addressed. The Alderson model had demonstrated that responsible practices could be commercially viable, creating market pressure for all producers to improve standards. "I'm pleased to hear that," Meredith said sincerely. "The principles we're formalizing today are designed to be adaptable across different geological and regulatory contexts. Our technical teams would welcome deeper collaboration with your operations." As the formal sessions resumed, Meredith found her attention drawn to a notification that appeared on her secure device. A message from the Department of Defense regarding a classified development related to rare earth applications in advanced weapons systems. She flagged it for later review, knowing that despite her imminent step back from corporate leadership, her expertise would continue to be sought by government agencies navigating the complex intersection of mineral resources and national security. The afternoon featured a tour of both the Institute's research facilities and key sections of the mining operation. Jesse and Sophia joined the group to demonstrate the quantum separation technology, which generated particular excitement among the technical experts in the delegation. The ability to process rare earth elements with dramatically reduced environmental impact represented a potential paradigm shift for an industry that had long struggled with its ecological footprint. As the day's formal activities concluded, Meredith invited Ray to join her for a private dinner at Elevation, a restaurant perched on the hillside overlooking Copper Ridge. The establishment represented another facet of the town's transformation, a dining experience that would be at home in any major metropolitan area, featuring innovative cuisine that showcased regional ingredients and attracted visitors from throughout the Southwest. "Quite a view," Ray observed, as they were seated at a table beside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below them, Copper Ridge glittered. In the gathering dusk, its lights tracing the shape of a community that had expanded dramatically while retaining its connection to the surrounding desert landscape. Hard to believe it's the same place, Meredith agreed, remembering the struggling town she had first encountered when she moved there to teach high school science after abandoning her geology career to raise Jessie as a single mother. Sometimes, I still expect to wake up and find myself in that little ranch house on Elm Street, grading papers and trying to make ends meet on a teacher's salary. You could buy that entire street now, Ray pointed out with the directness that characterized their friendship. Several times over. The money was never the point, she replied, though she recognized the truth in his observation. The wealth, generated by her discovery, had far exceeded anything she could have imagined when she impulsively bid on the Alderson Tract. Though I can't deny it's created opportunities I never would have had otherwise. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor at their table. Mayor Eleanor Delgado, Frank Delgado's daughter, and the third generation of her family to be involved in Copper Ridge civic leadership, approached with evident excitement. "I apologize for the intrusion," she began, "but the council just received confirmation that the International Resource Summit will be held here next year. It's official. Copper Ridge has been selected over Singapore and Geneva." The news represented a remarkable achievement for a community that had barely survived the closure of its original mining operation decades earlier. The summit would bring global leaders in resource policy, technology, and finance to Copper Ridge, further cementing its transformation from struggling mining town to internationally recognized center for resource innovation. "That's wonderful news, Eleanor," Meredith responded warmly. "The summit will be a perfect opportunity to showcase everything that's been accomplished here." After the mayor departed, Ray raised his glass in a toast. "To Copper Ridge's continued reinvention, and to your next chapter. And to partnerships that made it all possible," Meredith added, thinking of how essential Ray's expertise and support had been during the critical early days when she had first verified the rare earth deposit and navigated the challenges of developing it responsibly. As they enjoyed their meal, reminiscing about key moments from the past 2 decades, Meredith received another notification, this one from the security system at her home. The facial recognition had identified a visitor, Victor Blackwell. "Interesting. And timing," she remarked, showing Ray the alert. "Victor rarely makes social calls." "Maybe he heard about your transition and wants to mark the occasion," Ray suggested, though his tone indicated skepticism. While their relationship with Blackwell had evolved from outright antagonism to professional coexistence over the years, true friendship had never developed. "I suppose I should find out what he wants," Meredith decided, sending a message that she would meet him at her home in an hour. Meredith's residence reflected her personal evolution while honoring her practical roots. Rather than building an ostentatious mansion, as many would have done with her resources, she had chosen to renovate a historic property on the edge of town. The former ranch house had been expanded thoughtfully, incorporating sustainable design principles and advanced technology while maintaining the connection to the desert landscape that had drawn her to the region initially. Victor Blackwell waited on the covered patio, gazing out at the view of the Alderson operation in the distance. At 72, he remained imposingly fit, his silver hair expertly styled and his clothing custom-tailored to project the same image of sophisticated affluence he had cultivated throughout his career. "Victor," Meredith greeted him as she stepped onto the patio. "This is an unexpected visit." "I heard tomorrow is the official transition," he replied, turning from the view to face her. "I thought the occasion warranted a personal conversation." Rather than the formal message my office would typically send, Meredith gestured toward the seating area, curious about his true purpose. Their interactions over the years had always contained layers of meaning beyond the surface conversation. "I brought something I thought might interest you," Blackwell continued, placing a slim document portfolio on the table between them. "Something from the very beginning of this remarkable saga." Inside the portfolio was a geological survey dated approximately 6 months before Meredith had purchased the Alderson Tract at the tax auction. The survey, commissioned by a subsidiary of Blackwell Development, included preliminary assessments of mineral content that specifically noted unusual concentrations of elements that were likely rare earth compounds. "You knew," Meredith said, quietly, examining the document with professional interest. "You knew what was there before I ever bid on the property." Blackwell nodded, watching her reaction carefully. "We had indications, yes, but indications aren't proof, and the market for these elements was still developing. The cost-benefit analysis didn't justify acquisition at that time. Yet when I purchased it, you immediately offered 3 times what I'd paid," Meredith recalled, "and then escalated rapidly from there." "Because your interest changed the calculation," Blackwell explained. "Your background in geology suggested you might have recognized something we'd undervalued. When you refused the initial offers, it confirmed our suspicion that the property might be more valuable than our preliminary assessment indicated." Meredith considered this revelation, fitting it into the complex history they shared. "Why show me this now, after 20 years? "Perhaps a desire to set the record straight before your official departure," Blackwell suggested. "Or perhaps a belated acknowledgement that your vision for this land proved more valuable than anything I had planned for it." The admission was as close to humility as Victor Blackwell was likely to come. His original vision for the Alderson Tract, incorporating it into his Eagle Vista resort development, would have generated profit measured in millions. Meredith's alternative approach had created value measured in billions, while simultaneously revitalizing an entire community and advancing environmental standards for an industry. "I appreciate the gesture," Meredith said honestly, "though I suspect there's a practical aspect to this visit as well." A hint of the familiar calculating smile appeared, perceptive as always. "Yes, there is a business matter to discuss. Blackwell Development is preparing to divest its remaining holdings in Copper Ridge, including the Eagle Vista property. Before offering it on the open market, I wanted to give Alderson the opportunity for first consideration." The proposal made strategic sense. Eagle Vista had evolved from a pure luxury resort into a facility that hosted conferences and educational programs related to the rare earth industry. Having it under the same ownership as the Alderson operations would create opportunities for more integrated development. "I'll bring it to the board's attention," Meredith promised, "though as of tomorrow, I'll no longer be directly involved in those decisions." "But your recommendation will carry significant weight," Blackwell observed. "Accurately, I've prepared detailed information about the property and operations for your review." After Blackwell departed, Meredith sat for a time with the original geological survey, contemplating how differently events might have unfolded if he had recognized the true value of the rare earth deposits earlier. The community's trajectory, her own life path, even national resource policy might have developed along entirely different lines. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, typical of autumn in Copper Ridge. Meredith rose early, her routine unchanged despite the significance of the day ahead. She began with a walk along the trail that wound through the native desert landscaping. Surrounding her home, the path illuminated by the first golden rays of sunlight cresting the eastern mountains. The formal transition ceremony was scheduled for mid-morning at Alderson headquarters. As Meredith prepared, selecting a professional outfit that balanced dignity with the practicality that had always characterized her approach, she received a video call from Jessie and Sophia. "We won't be able to make it to the ceremony," Jessie explained, looking both apologetic and excited. The quantum separation system encountered an unexpected reaction with one of the heavy, rare Earth concentrations. "Nothing dangerous," he added quickly, seeing her expression shift to concern. "But it's actually producing a more efficient separation than the models predicted. We need to document and analyze this while it's happening." "The science comes first," Meredith assured him, privately pleased that her son shared her priorities. "We'll capture the ceremonial aspects for posterity, but the real legacy is in the innovations you're developing." The headquarters building of Alderson Earth Mining Corporation reflected the company's evolution over 2 decades. The original modest structure had been expanded several times as operations grew, each addition incorporating advanced environmental features and architectural elements that honored the surrounding landscape. The result was a campus that projected both technological sophistication and environmental mindfulness, physical manifestations of the principles Meredith had established from the beginning. The atrium was filled with employees, board members, community leaders, and media representatives when Meredith arrived. She was greeted with a standing ovation that visibly moved her, though she maintained the composed demeanor that had become her professional signature over the years. The formal proceedings were mercifully brief, with Board Chairman Dr. Marcus Chen outlining Meredith's contributions before introducing Dr. Eliza Washington, the brilliant materials scientist and experienced executive who would be assuming the role of CEO. Washington's appointment represented another milestone, the first African-American woman to lead a major mining corporation in an industry historically dominated by white men. When it was Meredith's turn to speak, she focused on the future rather than the past. "The true measure of leadership is what happens after you step aside," she observed. "I'm confident that Alderson will continue to thrive and innovate under Dr. Washington's guidance, building on the foundation we've established while pioneering new approaches that none of us can yet imagine." She spoke about the integration of corporate success with community well-being and environmental responsibility, the 3-part framework that had guided the company's development from its earliest days. "What began as a personal vision has become a cultural standard for this organization," she noted. "My greatest pride isn't in the minerals we've extracted or the profits we've generated, but in the values we've institutionalized along the way." The ceremonial handover featured the presentation of a custom-designed sculpture incorporating rare earth elements extracted from the Alderson site. The piece captured the molecular structure of the elements in an artistic form that would glow with different colors under various lighting conditions, a striking representation of the invisible value Meredith had first recognized in the supposedly worthless land. After the formal ceremony concluded, Meredith found herself surrounded by well-wishers from across the spectrum of her professional and personal life. Former students from her teaching days, now holding positions throughout the organization. Community members whose lives had been transformed by the opportunities the Alderson operation had created. Scientific colleagues who had collaborated on various research initiatives over the years. Among them was Harold Winters, the newspaper editor who had once mocked her purchase of the Alderson Tract as foolish. Now in his 80s and long retired from the Copper Ridge Gazette, he approached with evident emotion. "I've waited 20 years to say this properly," he began. "I was wrong, and you were right. Not just about the minerals being there, but about how developing them could transform this community. You've created something remarkable here, Meredith." "We all did," she corrected gently. "You documented the journey in the Gazette, That public record helped shape how the story was understood, both here and beyond. As the gathering gradually dispersed, Ray found her near the display of historical photographs that lined one wall of the atrium. The images chronicled the evolution of the operation from its earliest days, including one particularly meaningful photo of Meredith and Ray examining the first core samples that had confirmed the presence of rare earth elements. "Quite a journey," he observed, leaning on his mobility aid as he studied the images. "From that first day when you knocked on my door with your rock samples and wild theories." "They didn't seem so wild to you," Meredith recalled. "You were the first person who didn't think I was crazy for believing there was something valuable in that land." "I recognized expertise when I saw it," Ray replied simply. "Most people dismissed you as just a high school teacher who'd made a foolish purchase. I saw a geologist who'd spotted something everyone else had missed." The observation captured a truth that had been central to Meredith's experience: how people's perceptions of value were shaped by their own limitations of knowledge and vision. The worthless land had contained tremendous value all along. It simply required someone with the right expertise to recognize it and the determination to act on that recognition. After the formalities concluded, Meredith changed into more practical clothing and drove out to the original section of the Alderson Tract, where she and Jesse had first collected samples 20 years earlier. The area had been fully mined and subsequently restored, the careful environmental remediation returning it to a state that closely resembled its natural condition, while incorporating monitoring systems to ensure long-term ecological health. She walked along a path that wound through the restored landscape, remembering that first day when Jessie had declared her purchase the biggest waste of $15,000 in recorded history. The memory brought a smile. Her son had certainly revised that assessment over the years, as he witnessed how thoroughly that initial investment had transformed their lives and countless others. A movement caught her attention among the desert vegetation. A family of kit foxes, their presence an indicator of successful ecosystem restoration, watched her curiously before disappearing into their den. The sight pleased her, confirming that the land was once again supporting native wildlife after the intensive mining operations had been completed. Her phone signaled an incoming message, a notification that the quantum separation system was now operating at full capacity with efficiency metrics that exceeded all projections. Jesse had included a note: "Couldn't have built this without the foundation you created. The scientific legacy continues." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the desert in warm, golden light, Meredith reflected on the core insight that had guided her journey. That true value often lies beneath the surface, invisible to those without the knowledge to recognize it or the courage to act on that recognition. Whether in land, in ideas, or in people, the most significant worth is rarely obvious at first glance. The worthless land had yielded treasures beyond anything she could have imagined when she made that impulsive bid at the tax auction 20 years earlier. But the greatest value hadn't been in the rare earth elements themselves, substantial as their financial impact had been. It had been in the opportunities created, the community revitalized, the environmental standards elevated, and the scientific frontiers expanded. As she walked back to her vehicle, Meredith paused for one last look at the landscape that had changed her life and countless others. The Alderson Tract might have appeared empty and worthless to casual observers, but it had contained tremendous potential, waiting to be recognized by someone with the right perspective. In that sense, it was a perfect metaphor for the overlooked value that existed throughout the world. In abandoned properties, in discarded materials, in underestimated people. The discovery hadn't been luck or coincidence, but the natural result. of expertise meeting opportunity, of specialized knowledge allowing her to see possibility where others saw nothing of value. And while stepping back from corporate leadership represented a significant transition, Meredith knew her work of recognizing and developing hidden value would continue through the Institute and whatever new challenges emerged in the years ahead. The worthless land had taught her perhaps the most valuable lesson of all, that what others dismiss often contains the greatest potential for transformation, if only we have the knowledge to recognize it and the courage to pursue it. It was a lesson she had spent 20 years sharing with others and would continue to advance through whatever path lay ahead. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.